What's going on, everybody? It's Joey back with another Millie Maker video for NFL Week 3 on DraftKings. But before we get into that, be sure to go follow me on Twitter at JoeyCarrion_. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and all of that good stuff. So with that being said, let's get right into the slate. We have an interesting Week 3 slate. Week 2 saw a lot of injuries to a lot of players. A lot of starting quarterbacks are out, but nonetheless, there's still some very interesting games and some high total games as well. So if we take a look over at Fantasy Labs, we can look at the totals for every team on the slate. As we can see, the Packers are 25 team totals, so that's pretty high. The Patriots and the Cowboys stand out at 33.5 and 34.5 for their implied team total. And then the game everybody's going to target is this Chiefs-Ravens game. The Chiefs have a team total of 30. The Ravens is not so high with 23, but that seems to be the game that everybody is going to target on this slate. So with that being said, let's talk about some players. So we got Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson as the top two quarterbacks on this slate, respectively at 7.6K and 7K. I think by far these are the top two options, especially for GPPs. So I love both Pat Mahomes and Lamar this week. They should be on the lower side of ownership, and I think they have potential to have a slate-breaking day for both of them. Then we got Dak, who is 6.5K at home against probably one of the worst teams that you will ever see in your lifetime, the 2019 Miami Dolphins. They're just so bad everywhere, and Dak has been absolutely amazing to start the season so far. 78% completion percentage week 1, 86% completion percentage week 2 against the Redskins, 36 points week 1, 28 points last week. Obviously, he's gotten a price increase, and rightfully so. This new look Dallas offense has been amazing, and I think Dak is one of the best GBP options on the board this week. By far, he's one of the best. But let's get into some cheaper quarterbacks in the 6K range. We got Josh Allen, who's always a good fantasy quarterback play. He has rushing upside. He has throwing upside. He's just an all-around fantasy quarterback in every sense of the word. Real life, he might not be that good, but as long as he's getting fantasy points, it doesn't matter. And we got Kyler Murray, 5,800 at home against the Panthers. Kyler Murray has been pretty decent to start the year so far. 25 points, 19 points. I don't hate him, especially in GPPs. And I think he has potential in a up-paced environment against the Panthers, and the Panthers' defense isn't anything to be too worried about. And then we got some cheaper guys with Winston, Stafford. I do like Stafford. He should go relatively unowned this week with all the other great options at quarterback, and he's just in a great matchup against the Eagles, who have gotten shredded through the air so far to start this season. So I do like Stafford a lot. You can go, if you want to pay down, you could go to Danny Dimes or Daniel Jones. He's a starter now for the New York Football Giants. Eli Trash Manning is gone, so we got Daniel Jones up in there. I don't mind him at 5,000 if you just want to take a little dart throw. And Mason Rudolph as well, 4,800. But I think what will win the Millie Maker this week will be paying up for quarterback. I think going with Lamar or Pat Mahomes is definitely the way to go. And if not, then Dak. So those would be my three options at quarterback for the Millie Maker this week. So let's move on to running back. There's also a pretty good amount of solid running back plays this week. We got Saquon in a smash spot against the Bucks at 9,100. We got Zeke also in a smash spot at home against the Dolphins for 8,900, and then McCaffrey 8,700 on the road in Arizona. Like I just mentioned with Kyler, it's going to be a up-paced game, and the Panthers should see a lot of snaps, which means a lot of touches for McCaffrey. Out of these three top guys, I'm more inclined to go with Zeke in cash games, but for GPPs, I think Saquon or CMC is definitely the way to go. I think McCaffrey would probably be my lock for the Millie Maker. I think he's just in the right environment. I do project the Panthers to be losing in this game, and McCaffrey will have a ton of usage out of the backfield as a receiver, and he will also have his usual amount of rushing attempts. So I love McCaffrey at 8,700 this week, and he's just the cheapest out of the big three with arguably a heavier workload than Zeke and Barkley to start the year. So lock in McCaffrey. He should be in 80% of your lineups. Then we got guys in the under 8K range. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to Kamara as long as Breeze is out. So Kamara is not in play for me this week in any format. But just to take a look at some of these guys that are in the 8K range, I mean, there's only three of them. Le'Veon Bell, Agholor, Cook between 7 and 8K. And I do love Dalvin and Agholor this week. I think they are absolute smash plays. Dalvin Cook's at home against the Raiders. The Raiders' defense is nothing to be scared about, and the Vikings have been adamant on giving Dalvin Cook a lot of touches, and that has came true so far this season with back-to-back games with over 20 rush attempts. Also, he's seeing a couple catches here and there, which is good for DraftKings full PPR. 3 touchdowns on the year so far. I love Dalvin Cook and GPPs as well. Just from a general tournament strategy, I think you want to get your running backs. I think you want to get your core running backs that will have a lot of volume, have a lot of touches, and have upside. So I think it's more beneficial to pay out for your 3 running backs. As we know, if you've watched from my first video till now, the most optimal way to win the Millionaire Maker is to have 3 running backs, to use one in your flex. So I will be using one in my flex, and I think the move is to pay up and then find your receivers in the mid-range. I think that is the most optimal way to win $1 million. But just to take a look at some of these other running backs that you could go to that are a little bit cheaper. I do love Marlon Mack. I'm recording this on Wednesday, and he was questionable today. He didn't practice, a modified practice, whatever that means. Who knows? But if he plays, I do love Marlon Mack at 5,800 against the Falcons. The Falcons' run defense is nothing to be scared of. Dalvin Cook ate them up week 1. The Eagles really didn't run the ball against them last week, so that's nothing to be afraid of. I love Marlon Mack at 5,800 if you want to pay down. He could potentially be your third flex. He potentially could be my third flex. I love Marlon Mack. Chris Carson is projected to be one of the highest owned running backs at home against the Saints. The spot is all right because they're at home. Home running backs usually are very good. So I do like Chris Carson at 5,900. He should see his 15 to 20 touches, so I do like that a lot. Sony Michel is also a solid play at 6,000 at home against the Jets, but the Jets' run defense actually is pretty decent, so I probably will not go there. But just to talk about some cheaper guys real quick, we got Devontae Freeman, who is 4.9K. I would be inclined to go there if the Falcons showed that he would get a full workload, but to start the season so far, he hasn't. Only 8 rush attempts, 11 rush attempts in his first 2 games, only 3 catches in each game, resulting in a measly 5 and 9 points. That's not the type of usage we want for our Millie Maker team. You will not be able to win $1 million playing guys that are getting 10 touches. Just to take a look at some other cheap guys, we got, we got basically scrubs that are not in play for your Millie Maker team. So yeah, these guys are all bad. They probably will not contribute much. I guess the only guy is McCoy. He did practice today, but Damian Williams did not practice. But yeah, there's not much for these cheap running backs. It's very, very dry, and I think there's nobody you should be playing down in this range. So pay up for your running backs and, get the guys that will give you the highest upside with their volume. So wide receiver, we're going to talk about some wide receivers real quick. So you could get contrarian this week and pay up for guys like D Hop or Devontae or Cooper or even Michael Thomas. You could. But there's a bunch of value in this, honestly, from 7K down, where this is where you should be picking from. There's just so much value from 7K down. This is where your receiving core should be made up of. And trust me, there's a lot of guys that are going to be low owned in this range that could help you win $1 million. Obviously, you can't play just all chalk guys, but you could play one and then get crazy with your other two wide receivers and your tight end and your defense. But just to get started, like Julio Jones is in a smash spot against the Colts on the road. He's really, really cheap, like $7,300. That's extremely cheap for someone of Julio's caliber, and he's seen 11 and 10 targets. He was $7,300 against the Eagles, but that was on a showdown slate. But $8,000 to start week 1. That's going based off that price. So $7,300 is really cheap for Julio, and he does project to be one of the highest owned receivers on the slate. I also love Keenan Allen and Chris Godwin. They're both 100 apart from each other, but I'd be more inclined to go with Keenan for GPPs just because his target share is better than Godwin's, and I think Keenan is just a better receiver. He's seen 25 targets over the first 2 weeks. Just missed the 100-yard bonus last week on the road against a tough Lions defense. Still put up 17 points, and they lowered his price. So I do love Keenan. I do like Watkins and Kenny Golladay, Mike Evans. I like all those guys. But if we're paying up for running backs, we're going to look into this range and try and find some value guys that we could potentially play for GPPs. So one of those guys is none other than Marquise Brown. If you want to pay up for Lamar and GPPs, you're going to want to stack him with Marquise Brown. He saw 13 targets last week against the Cardinals with playing 51 of the 79 snaps, which was a significant increase from week 1. And I think he's one player that you could target in this range that has making winning upside. Like he showed at week 1 that he does have the upside going up against a bad Chiefs secondary. Not too sure how the field feels about him, but I feel really well about him, and that's all that matters. So 5,900, I love him. Week 1. Wow. So I'm not sure how the field feels about him, but I think he's in an excellent spot this week, and I love him at 5,900. That'd be my top guy in this range. So moving on, just taking a look at some of these other guys in the same range. I do like Josh Gordon to bounce back this week. He only had 5 targets last week against the Dolphins for 2 catches, but Xavier Howard was on Josh Gordon as they use Antonio Brown in the slot more than on the outside. So I like Josh Gordon to bounce back here against a lowless New York Jets secondary. But if I'm inclined to play a GPP option, it would probably either be Fitzgerald or Christian Kirk. Honestly, I like them in all formats, and I think Larry Fitzgerald is the guy to go to in GPPs. He's had 2 straight 100-yard receiving days, both at cheap salaries. Really hasn't gotten an increase. I don't think DraftKings has faith in this Cardinals offense just to keep this up, and especially the receivers. But when they're seeing 40 to 50 to 55 pass attempts from this Cliff Kingsbury offense, that means a bunch of targets for the Cardinals wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, which is Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk respectively. And we can see that right here as Fitz has 24 targets through the first 2 weeks. Just absolutely crazy. So if we could project for him to get at least 10 targets, I would say minimum 8 targets at 5,100 at home against the Panthers, who really they don't have a strong secondary. I think Fitzgerald is one of those guys that you could plug into your lineup. He's relatively cheap compared to a lot of these other guys, and I think he's a good pivot off guys like Demarcus Robinson and McCole Hardman, who are going to be owned. That doesn't mean I don't like Demarcus Robinson or Hardman or some of these other guys, because I do, but you're going to need low ownership somewhere, and I think Fitzgerald fits the bill. 5,100, I do love him. Taking a look at some guys under 5K, the top option in this range is none other than Emmanuel Sanders. Absolutely incredible what he's done coming back from a torn Achilles, which it seems like he tore like 7 months ago. Just absolutely nuts. He's had 20 targets the first 2 games, so an average of 10 per game at 4,800. Just absolutely disrespectful on DraftKings' part. Just like I just said, just disrespectful. He should be plugged in to all your lineups this week, and I love him for GPPs. Obviously, he's going to be really high owned in cash games as well, but I think we're going to need some value, guys, and Sanders fits that bill as a player who has massive upside at a very cheap price tag. Just talk about some other guys. I do like Deebo Samuel this week for 4,500. He's playing as the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco, so he should see a good amount of targets, and I do like him for 4,500. I don't really like any of these guys on the screen right now. I think nobody will play them. They don't really have roles on their teams. But just to talk about one more cheap guy, Nelson Agholor, who's also projected to be very chalky. But he will be the wide receiver 1 for Philadelphia. They have just so many injuries. Alshon is hurt. Deshaun Jackson is hurt. Dallas Goedert is hurt. So they need people to catch the ball, and Agholor is one of them. The Eagles love to throw the ball, and when those guys went out against the Falcons, Alshon and D-Jack, Agholor absolutely went off, and this stat line should be boosted as he dropped a clear-cut touchdown against the Falcons, and he would have had a massive day if he caught that. But 11 targets, if we could project for him to get 8 to 10 targets at a 3,600 salary, I think he has to be locked into your lineups this week. I do like Arcega-Whiteside and Devin Smith just as GPP punt players. They're not in consideration for cash, but as a milli maker, upside, play, you want guys who could potentially get you multiple touchdowns, and these are 2 guys that could fit that bill, so I don't hate them for GPPs. So moving on to tight end, I think there's a very condensed tight end pool this week. I don't really believe there's any pay down options unless you're going to go to Greg Olsen, but as we can see, he is questionable, or TJ Hawkinson, who's still pretty cheap, but his role should vary week to week, and there's a lot of volatility with playing him. So with that being said, I think there's only a couple options we can go to. I think we can either go to George Kittle, Evan Ingram, or Mark Andrews for GPPs. My preferred option would be George Kittle. My preferred option for the Millie Maker would be George Kittle this week. He's really, really cheap, as he's had, a pretty mediocre first 2 weeks, to say the least. He was 6,800 last week. He got a 1,200 price decrease. He hasn't been that good this season in terms of his stats, and I think this is a prime bounce back spot at home against the Steelers. I love George Kittle for GPPs this week. I also do love Evan Ingram on the road in Tampa. With Daniel Jones starting now, I think that does boost the Giants' pass catchers just a little bit. Obviously, we have to see what he could do. He was pretty good in the preseason, but that doesn't always translate to regular season success. So, I'm not opposed to playing Evan Ingram in at least a couple of your lineups. But specifically for the Millie Maker, I think Kittle's the way to go. But we also do have Mark Andrews, who's at 4.6K, and he's probably been the highest scoring tight end on the year so far. 27 and 28 points, respectively, in Week 1 and Week 2. And I think he is also a solid option. I'm more inclined to play him in cash, as he's the cheapest out of these three, and I think his floor is just very, very high. Obviously, his ceiling has been high this year, and I think I think he is a great play this week as well, if you do not want to play Kittle or Evan Ingram. So I will have shares of all three in GPPs, and probably go Kittle and Ingram or Andrews for my 2 Millie Maker lineups. But just to end this video off, we're just going to talk about some defense. Last week in the Millionaire Maker, if you do not pay for the Patriots defense, you were dead. You were not cashing. So we're not going to make the mistake this week. We're going to pay up for either the Cowboys or the Patriots defense. It's that simple. Obviously, there's some options down here that could pop off, but the Patriots are facing Luke Falk, who is a 6th-round pick. He is not good. The Jets' offense is very, very bad, and the Patriots' defense is very, very good. So we're either locking in the Patriots or the Cowboys going up against the Dolphins. I'm more inclined to lock in the Patriots just because they are 500 cheaper, and they only got a 100 price increase from their 37-point outing last week. So, we're locking in the Patriots. If you want to go with like the Vikings, I don't hate that, or even some cheaper option. I think you should just pay out for the Patriots. I think that's the best way to go. But that is it for this video. If you enjoy this video, please be sure to drop a like, comment, and also hit that subscribe button. If you want, you can hit the bell right next to the subscribe button. It'll give you notifications every time I upload. And that is it for this rendition of Week 3 of NFL DraftKings. And good luck to all of you. And hopefully I will become a millionaire this week. Thank you. Have a good day.